Hello, this is Melissa Teitelbaum. I use the pronouns she and her. I'm doing my bachelor's of social work at Ryerson University, and I'm a placement student at For a Safer Space. Today, I'm going to be talking about the book Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. The book is about gaps that exist in today's mainstream feminist movement, who benefits, who is being left out. Kendall brings race, class, sexual orientation, and ability into conversations about gender equality. And she asks us to view issues such as food security, access to quality education, safe neighborhoods, a living wage, and medical care as feminist issues. So today I will be focusing on the book's 12th and 13th chapters. Chapter 12 is called Fear and Feminism, and it focuses on themes of fear and how it motivates women to commit acts of harm against one another based on race, class, and other factors, as well as the patriarchy and how not all members have the same amount of power. And this is also based on race, class, and other factors. So in this chapter, Kendall speaks of the assumption made by a lot of white women that all members of the patriarchy hold the same power, while in reality, men of color do not have the same power to oppress as white men. White women expect Black women to always come out against sexual assault by Black men, but do not always hold white men accountable for their own actions. Mainstream feminism isn't really making favorable conditions for white women either. And feminists also exist in conservative spheres where decisions are made that are harmful to feminists themselves. So conservative women are being empowered by feminism in these spheres to do harm. There's the example given of an anti-choice bill in Alabama being pushed through by women. There are cases of using feminism to meet personal goals and then abandoning it, even though there needs to be a realization by white mainstream feminism that women also have the power to do harm, not just men. It must be understood that the impacts of feminism are informed by broader politics. There's also a tendency for white women to turn to the patriarchy for protection whenever they feel threatened. There's a fear of losing this protection, so they stand by it at their own convenience and speak against it only when they are directly threatened by it. So this does not mean exactly that Black women do not have to challenge the patriarchy, but they need to look for solutions outside of the carceral state. So calling the police may stop one form of violence, but introduce another. While white feminism can be used as a weapon, intersectional feminism can be used to help communities heal, kind of like a bandage. But feminism can be dangerous when it comes from a place of fear because it allows for increased surveillance in certain communities in ways that make them feel unsafe. And there's also the fear of driving away other white women by challenging them. And this is damaging to a concept of feminism that is safe for everyone. So feminism needs to challenge the narrative of fear, of the anger of marginalized communities in order to advocate for equality. Otherwise, they're just feeding into a narrative that fear is a good reason to uphold white supremacy. White women right now fear that if they push back against misogyny, they will lose what power they have. But the work that needs to be done internally is less about overcoming the white male patriarchy and more about giving up an embrace of it, as Kendall puts it on page 170. So another quote that stood out in this chapter on page 163, it's not feminism for all women, just for those who think they can be safe inside a patriarchal white supremacist society. It requires no empathy, compassion, care, or concern, and yet it is still technically feminism. Conservative feminism enables some of the worst policy decisions under the guise of women protecting women. So conservative feminist policy is really about white women protecting their own positions of safety within a white patriarchal system. But a real inclusive feminism would not cater to the fear of a few, but consider the safety of all. So in chapter 13, which is entitled Race, Poverty, and Politics, we focus on themes of how race, poverty, and politics intersect with one another and other factors such as gender, to result in a big portion of women not being able to have a say in how their own society is run. So Mickey Kendall describes poverty as a phenomenon that happens slowly over time and generations, but politicians do not see long-term poverty as a moral or personal failing when it occurs in white communities, but it becomes a moral issue when talking about the Black communities. The assumption is that low voter turnout in these communities is about laziness, when in reality, these neighborhoods have been neglected for a long time. So the people there are no longer have hope that politicians care about them. White working class voters fear that they will lose uh, previous positions if they do not vote against more socially progressive candidates. And there's a myth of meritocracy, making them feel as though they have earned their successes more than others. So the overarching goal is always the maintenance of white supremacy. There's the example of the suffragette movement, where white suffragettes discouraged Black people from being able to vote as they felt it would undermine white supremacy. And the same thing is continuing to happen today, with the example of white Donald Trump voters being driven by racial resentment, regardless of gender, including many white women who had previously benefited from advances of feminism. But when not all women are taken care of in the same ways by feminism, eventually white women stop reaping the benefits as well. And women of color are all expected to vote in the same way, while white women are not. But no politicians are prioritizing the concerns of the poorest and most vulnerable, even though the poorest people are the best versed in what it takes to survive, because it becomes about working together to survive together. Currently, feminism is most focused on the needs of middle-class white women and not on protecting voting rights of marginalized people. There is voter suppression happening, examples such as voter ID laws, shutting down busing voters to polls, closing polling centers early, and reducing numbers of places to get ID. White feminism is ignoring the way that racism is impacting elections and the gap between the right to vote and having access to voting. Voting rights are also being taken away by discriminatory policing. So people can lose access to the right to vote if they have a criminal record. And new barriers are preventing marginalized people from voting, since those of the Jim Crow era were removed. But few feminist organizations have made protecting voting rights for all a priority. They also have not dealt with the bigotry that allows white women to vote against the interests of all women. But any narrative that assumes women can be treated as a united voting bloc with no concern for race, class, or other factors is short-sighted and deeply misguided, as Kendall puts it. A quote from the end of this chapter on page 187 is, "Feminism that encompasses all the issues that impact women, from poverty to criminal justice reform, to living wages, to better protections for immigrants, to LGBTQIA issues, is feminism that ensures voting rights for all is a foundational issue. When issues that impact marginalized women are ignored, the result is a lack of respect for their humanity and a subsequent denial of their voting rights, since their opinions are not seen as important. But intersectional feminism must recognize all women's votes as integral to the democratic process." So that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.